I'd like to welcome everybody today to a very special episode of Lunch with Layne, and we're honored to be in the presence of Commissioner Reina Saco, who's with us today. And Commissioner Saco, I'd like to just read kind of a brief biography, if I may, about you for our law students and viewers. And you were born in Santiago, Cuba, right? Is that right? In 1990.
Yep.
And you and your family had fled Cuba in '94 and refugee camp and paroled in the United States in 1995, settled in Hialeah, Florida, and still lives there today. And just wanted to let you know, our prayers and thoughts are certainly with the Cuban community, near and dear to my students as well as my family, okay, to let you know. So certainly everything that you and your family went through, incredible. You attended the University of South Florida. You graduated with a BA in Russian Studies and a BA in English Literature. So Commissioner is very smart. Went on to study at University of Michigan here, graduated with an MA in Russian, Eastern European, and Eurasian Studies. Wow. And relocated to Gainesville. And then you attended the University of Florida Levin College of Law and graduated and became an attorney. She's dedicated herself to community service. You volunteered, and this is so impressive. I'm always pushing volunteering with Three Rivers Legal Services, Department of Children and Families, Children's Legal Services, the Intimate Partner Violence Assistant Clinic. Shout out to Teresa Drake, right, over there, the wonderful Ms. Drake, and the H Judicial Circuit Bar Association's Ask a Lawyer project. Wow, Commissioner, a lot there. You graduated with your JD in 2017, and I do want to point out a special accolade to you that you were a fellow, right, with the Equal Justice Works at Legal Services. And you were the first one, I believe, in many years out of UF Law,
Yep.
which I'm very glad to trumpet that. And as such, you work with low-income immigrant communities to secure safe and affordable housing, as well as access to community resources and rights. In your free time, I do want to mention this as well, because I think this is kind of fun, Commissioner. Like us, you enjoy gardening and photographing wildlife at Gainesville's Nature Park. So I would love to talk about all of that. There's so much there to unpack, Commissioner. Getting started, let me ask you about this. Where did you went to UF Law, I know, and I kind of want to ask you, why did you choose UF Law? So you would have had your pick of many fine law schools, right? I guess around the country.
So I applied to, I think, 8 or 9 law schools. But at the time I was applying, I was in Michigan and we had the coldest winter in 35 years. So I looked to the Bible Belt, the Southeast and Florida, because it was too cold to stay up there. And I missed my family. Being on the other side of the country was difficult. I knew law school would be difficult and I wanted to have some kind of community and family support. So I applied to all these schools. Other schools offered me money, but I still would have been out of state. I chose Florida. It had no money, but I was closer to family and it had a much better cost of living than the other places I would have gone to. And I think looking back, it has just skyrocketed through the ranks compared to those schools. So it worked out in the end.
It worked out for everybody. I think we're very glad, that you attended UF Law and decided to stay in Gainesville as well. A rare choice for a lot of our students, right? In terms of being able to do that. Can I ask you about anything that stands out with your law school experience that you'd like to share with our students?
So law school is a lot like high school. It's just drinking age adults in high school. But that said, I found wonderful mentors. I was the kid who would knock on every teacher's door and say, "Can I hang out in your office?" And I would get to know professors. That's how I got my first research assistant job. That's how I actually went to Cuba with the law school on a first ever conference that they did in Cuba. So that kind of involvement and closeness to my professors really opened a lot of doors for me and let me do things that a lot of my classmates just couldn't. But law school overall was a good experience. It in itself, apart from the education, was a learning experience about yourself and other people. But there were great things through the law school intimate partner violence assistant clinic. I got to be in court as a law student, and I won a case for a survivor of domestic
Oh,
violence as a law
excellent.
student. It really, doing that clinic, for example, my last year was more helpful than sitting in a classroom. And when I interviewed for jobs, they pointed to that in-court experience, to that client experience as just having been monumental in setting me apart from folks. So it actually gave me the opportunity to test drive being an attorney before I just went off nilly-willy.
Thank you, Commissioner. And one of the things that you were talking about is you were actively engaged during the law school process with your professors, right? And you
Mhm.
said that really helped. Is that
Yep.
right? It resonated with you, certain professors, right? And inspired you, I'm guessing?
Yep. To be fair, one of them got tired of me and said, "Go down the hall. That one's Cuban and you can talk to her more." But it landed me a job. And I still go back and visit both of those professors. One of them was very surprised when I went into landlord tenant law because he was my property professor. So he knew exactly how qualified I was. Um, but no, I still talk to professors who have moved away. They have my cell phone. We email every now and then. We've bumped into each other at events, and pre-COVID would get coffee. No, I consider a lot of them very, very dear friends. And if it hadn't been for COVID, I still would have been going in and out once a month to the law school to visit.
Thank you. No, I really like that engagement. I think, with not just our community, but also our legal community here at the university. Sometimes we feel a disconnect. You've heard that, right? I know we use words like town and gown, and there's these different committees. And I was on the Student Community Relations Advisory Board. What are your feelings? I want my students to be more civilly engaged. And particularly if they're going to be living here for 4, 6, 8 years, right? In Gainesville, how do we get them more engaged? Any ideas on it?
So there are a lot of volunteer opportunities. One that I didn't do, but I highly recommend for everyone, especially as they start law school, is try to be a guardian ad litem. You get to see how our courts work. You get to meet people in our community who might be in, less than ideal situations, but that gives you client experience. It gives you court experience. It gives you a connection to something outside of the four corners of UF, because you will actually go and meet, I don't want to say regular people, but law students are weird, regular people. You get to meet them and see how folks in our circuit actually live and what hardships they're experiencing. And so that's a big one, and it takes like 2 hours of your time a month. So anybody could do it. Um, the local bar association has a bunch of activities to go out and help the community. Grace Marketplace has a bunch of activities or positions where you could volunteer with our homeless community and go out and do engagement. We have so many food pantries that folks could volunteer a couple hours sorting or making deliveries to. I think even the hospitals have something similar to candy stripers that you can go in and just, bedside manner, be attentive, and give back to everything around you. It's not necessarily the four corners or five, I don't know what weird shape it is, but
Right.
it's not just the corners of UF. And being able to step off campus and engage really showed me Gainesville. And I didn't do that with any of my prior degrees. I always, stayed to my university borders and I studied. But with law school, I actually stepped out and got to live in Gainesville. And I hadn't done that before.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you for mentioning all those wonderful opportunities. And I'm going to work on this to drop links in as well. And so that one of the first lunch with Layne, I think that was posted, Mike Tamano, a member of our community, was involved with Guardian Ad Litem, call him Superhero Mike. And he encourages particularly children, to reach in and find their superhero, right? Whatever talents, that they have. I'm going to put a link in to all those opportunities that you were talking about. Okay, Commissioner. And I promised the commissioner I wouldn't go off script, and you can see how well Layne keeps his promises, Commissioner. You're so good at this. Let's talk about your legal career a little bit. Would you like to start with the Equal Justice Works? And it sounds like that was some really important work. Or yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't find that job. I had 3 separate mentors have it sent to them through listservs, through advertisements, and then they each independently contacted me and said, "You should do this." And prior to this, I'd done maybe 10, 12 interviews for state attorney's offices, for private firms, for the public defender. rejection instantly after rejection. So I was a little beat down. I didn't know if I'd even be good enough for something, some national fellowship that only gets like 100 people every year. What am I going to do? So I applied, and I had a lovely mentor in career services called Erin Carr, and she reviewed it and she gave me a mock interview. She was like, "You're giving perfect answers. You are the ideal candidate." And I was just kind of slunched over like, yeah, I guess. But I actually applied for two of the three. I applied for three of the four. I interviewed for two of those three, and I was the first pick for one of them. And I really didn't believe it. So it was a huge opportunity. Like you said, I'd been the first one at UF that had in memory. But once I started, we actually had more people apply and had at least one more after I left. So it's been normalized to apply to these kinds of things now. But that fellowship actually gave me a lot of freedom. The beauty of that fellowship is it is money that was given to me, not to the law firm or the project I'm working at. It is money for me to do a project that I think is helpful to the community. So I had a lot of freedom to just modify as I went along for the 2 years. It let me do legal clinics in Orange, Osceola, and what's the other county? That general Apopka area, which touches about 4 counties. So you never know which legal aid you can go to. You don't know what your rights are depending on what county you're in. So I got to do a lot of legal clinics there. I got to train in basic family law and landlord tenant law, a lot of nonprofit groups there so that they could coach through the usual issues. I got to pass on a lot of that information. I got to do a lot of workshops to educate, even up here in Gainesville, where I did a lot of my other work. I helped advocate and pass renters' rights in Gainesville and Alachua County.
Thank you.
I then got to vote to approve my first year in office. So I've watched that baby forever.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of more advocacy than court work. Although I had a couple of filings that I had to submit on very emergency cases that wouldn't have been able to have time to be submitted somewhere else or referred out. So gave me some drafting experience. It gave me a lot of people experience. It gave me government experience. And it was a very different first 2 years than a lot of my classmates had.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, I'm amazed at your amount of civil engagement. It's incredibly inspiring, and this is something that I've certainly, I want to pass along the torch, as it were, right to our students to pick it up for us, Commissioner. Maybe you've mentioned so many organizations you belong to or recommend. I don't know if we need to revisit that. We've already gone through, quite a few. But is there anything you think just locally, right? If you could recommend one or two, what would you recommend? It's a good thing. The 8th Judicial Circuit Bar.
Well, if you're an attorney, but they also take on mentees regularly. So in law school, they'll take on mentees. I'm not sure how they handle undergrads that are interested, but I don't imagine that they would push them aside. I think the 8th Circuit has actually won awards for being the most community engaged bar in the whole state. So they are always looking to make that connection with UF and incoming law students, current law students, and to mentor them through. I have many prior presidents of that bar that I knew as mentors and or bosses. So they're a good bunch that would happily mentor and take you through a lot of different opportunities.
The Guardian Ad Litem program you mentioned too, right?
Yeah, and the Guardian Ad Litem, because they're used to handling people who are in a panic. And I feel if you are thinking about law school or in law school, they can handle you very well and know how to manage being a mentor to you at that point. But no, those are great programs with really folks who are mentorship minded, who have been in the trenches, 5 years, 50 years, and can really give you a lot of warning and advice on how to go forward and if this is the career you choose.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that that's really important. One of the things I know the law school, has engaged with the Eighth Judicial Circuit for the students. We were trying to do the same thing with the pre-law students, right? In other words, get some attorneys to help maybe be mentors, right, for them and find out if law, is right for them, in different areas of law. That inclusiveness, I think. Um, One of the things that you mentioned, you're going to great organizations, things you've been involved in, and certainly, City Commission. I want to thank you for your service, of course, on the City Commission. And boy, I mean, there's so many issues and things, right? Um, is this fair, Commissioner Saco? I'm going to ask you, can you walk us through a typical day or so of a city commissioner's life?
There isn't
Is it?
one.
Yeah, I was going to
There is
ask you.
no typical day.
Right.
So in theory, the only static thing is that the first and third Thursday of the month, we have a regular meeting, and that the second and fourth, we have a general policy meeting. Those are officially the only things I have to show up to. But of course, that's not the case. There's a million special meetings that we're currently having because it's budget season, even though budget season lasts about 9 months. It's most of the year is budget season. We'll have, subcommittees that we're appointed to. We'll have intermunicipal organizations that we're appointed to. So I'm on I'm going to get it wrong, North Central Florida Regional Planning Council. And so that's a bunch of counties and cities, I think throughout the Eighth Circuit and then some, that come together to plan intermunicipality issues, roads, safety, all that. And we have to do that meeting. We have the MTPO, which is the Metropolitan Transportation. It's about traffic, roads, that general. I will never remember what it actually stands for. I will retire and still not remember. But that handles all the roads and safeties within Alachua County and Gainesville. So intermix, how we handle roads, bike paths, lights. When we had unfortunate accidents and deaths on University, we were using that platform to talk to the state transportation authority, to figure out what we could do. So there's a lot of it is triage.
Yeah.
We can plan things a month ahead, but that's not what my calendar is going to look like.
Commissioner, I think you and I met actually. It was the Alachua County Human Rights Coalition, right? And they were doing the ID cards. And you remember that night I was getting my, I'm very proud to get, my Gainesville ID card, made there. And I think that's where we met. Later on, when you and I were talking about, thank you again. You also were present at our voting rights workshop, voting 2020, we call it. Probably shouldn't have put a date on there, right? Because the information's timeless. But you also provided a lot of information as well on that. You were dealing with a sinkhole issue too, I remember at the time, right?
I forgot. That was
near
so
dear to my
many
neighborhood.
emergencies ago that I forgot.
Yes, you forgot. That's how many things, right, are on your plate at any one time, right, as a city commissioner. I just want to let our viewers know, that even when I've been talking to you, you had these so many emergencies ago, right, that and I think it's been dealt with, with my understanding, dealt with, but very close to where I live. So of course, worry about sinkholes in Gainesville, a real concern, amongst other things. But yeah, GRU, the infrastructure, as you mentioned, right, providing the homeless, race marketplace, all of these things, right, are all on the agenda.
Fire, police. Let's see, what else do we have on there? The fire, police, we have GRU, we have Grace, we have, which technically homeless services should not be a city issue. It's technically delegated to the county.
The county, right?
Yeah, it's their responsibility, but we end up picking up a lot of it. Let's see, roads, buses. We run a transit authority. What else? We do a lot of conservation efforts. So we have that. We run parks and culture systems. We do all the development. We have to approve permitting for development and building in the city. We do quite a lot.
Yeah, Commissioner Saco, this is something I wanted to ask you about while we're talking. when I noticed that Gainesville has a pretty large homeless population, any theories behind that as to,
So
that's one of our huge issues here.
there's kind of two sides to it. So
Hmm,
there are two things that kind of push it to the middle. On the one hand, Gainesville tries to take a very humanitarian, holistic approach to homelessness.
right.
We are not Ocala, and Ocala basically made it illegal to sit at a bus stop to eat a sandwich if you looked homeless, because then you were loitering. And
Isn't
so they actually passed local ordinances, like gave the police free reign to basically harass folks. If you might appear homeless and you're sitting at a bus stop to eat your lunch, they would tell you, like, move along, you can't just loiter here. So you have surrounding areas with mindsets like that. Folks are going to come in to where it's closest to a service and food pantries and just general human kindness, and kind of move out of those areas and concentrate here. Another part of it, we're actually surrounded by a lot of prisons. So Alachua County has a lot of prisons to the north, to the south, and we are kind of the hub for this region. So in terms of hospitals, in terms of services, it's kind of Gainesville. So folks are attracted to the area. That said, Grace Marketplace makes, like a good 100 folks housed every year at least,
Right.
while working with other folks to get into assisted living facilities if they have mental health issues, if they have age-related issues. They do the best that they can, but it's not just our community we deal with. We're dealing with other counties surrounding us also coming in here. So my hope would be that those counties pick up some of that responsibility and serve those folks so that they don't have to come all the way to Gainesville. But since they're here, we aren't going to turn folks away and say, you have to have been registered in Gainesville in some capacity for us to give you services. That's not actually going to help anyone. So we help folks as they come in. It's just the other counties around us aren't doing anything, so they come to here.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner, for talking about these issues because, otherwise I'm not sure, particularly for myself, I'd love to go to a commission meeting and go, oh, can I ask everyone, about it? But thank you. And thank you for advocating, I know it's a tough, your constituency, right? And finding that balance with humanitarianism, as you talked about, right? With reasonableness, with safety, there's so many considerations there, and I know that's a hard balancing act. I wanted to ask you, Commissioner, hardships during your career. What have you encountered, and how have you overcome those?
So being a woman is hard.
Yeah.
Law and politics are historically male dominated. So I remember at one point as an attorney that I was being spoken over, I was being talked down to, I was being dismissed, and then passive aggressively blamed for a lot of things. And I spoke up to that attorney, and I let them know that wasn't acceptable. And then I went to our director and I filed a complaint and I said, this is not acceptable for me or for our clients. And it was uncomfortable for everyone. It was very uncomfortable for me because I still had 6 months working there. But it was one of those where if I don't advocate for myself, no one else will. The advocate has to advocate for themselves. No one else is going to do that. So yeah, I was referred to as the lady attorney many times.
Oh, yeah.
I look very young. So I would be doing legal clinics, and two things could happen. If I had my paralegal with me, they would talk to her about the problems and just go full force. Here's my issue. And she would say, maybe you want to talk to the attorney. And they would go, oh, that's the attorney. Or I had a client sit down and she'd done the thing that all lawyers hate. She'd gone to the internet. She'd read on the internet certain things about divorce law, and she disagreed with what I was telling her. And she's like, well, how long have you even been an attorney? I was like, well, a lot longer than you have. So, I kind of know what I'm saying. So it's easy to get dismissed as a woman. It's easy to get dismissed as young. And I wasn't the youngest in my law class. I was, towards the older crowd because a lot of folks come straight out of undergrad. So we had 21-year-olds who were in law school and going out to do internships. And I imagine they got dismissed as much as as often as I did. But I'm told you grow out of that phase. Eventually I'll get wrinkles and gray hair and people will take me seriously. Um, but the dismissiveness, as a woman and as a young woman was difficult to get past. And sometimes you just have to be kind of throw it back in people's faces. Like, well, I've been an attorney longer than you have, or I actually have this degree and I'm barred, so I know what I'm talking about. Uh, you, you have to push back. Not super aggressively, but you do have to push back, or you just grow resentful, and then you aren't any good to anyone.
Commissioner, thank you for sharing that. In fact, one of the prior lunch with Layne's, Peg O'Connor, an attorney in
I love
town.
her.
Everybody does, I know, and I'll throw in there Aaron Carr as well, right? These are wonderful, individuals, right? That those of us that have had contact with, and everybody loves. We'll say that, right? I think that's had contact with them. But Peg had mentioned, the unfortunate aspect, exactly what you were just talking about, being a woman. And what's amazing to me, Commissioner, is that, in 1994, fall of 94, I entered UF law. And, everybody's going to know my age now. But, Commissioner, at that point, I believe that we were already dealing with more females than males in my class. So, when you think about it, you know what I mean? It certainly, you would think things would have improved, but then I hear stories like yours and, and Peg's, and I'm like, gosh, still we're we got some battles, right? Out there, and some things to overcome, right? I like your philosophy of kind of persevering with it. Let me ask you about this. A lot of people think of, and I don't think you were saying along these lines, not sexual harassment necessarily, but power harassment, potentially. And
Yes.
power harassment is one of those things that I think is so underappreciated and unaddressed. And you know what I mean? It's people always think about harassment being sexual, in nature, and not necessarily. You and I know that, right?
Yep.
And I'm afraid that the gender harassment that, and I think we can call it that. Let's call it for what it is, right, Commissioner? What you experienced, part of that power harassment, right? Potentially, right? And the ways that you dealt with it. Being an attorney, do you think that gave you, though, a little bit more? Some people might be afraid to speak up, and
So I like to say, and I know other people say this, law school scrambles your brain. So being an attorney completely rewires your brain. You don't think like normal people. So my family has pointed out that since law school, I will almost sit frozen because I'm contemplating every outcome. So I'm playing chess to the end in so many different scenarios, trying to see every move from first pawn out. And I don't know how it's going to end. So it did for a while. I have no physical evidence. I don't have emails. I don't have a recording. I don't have witnesses to it. What does it matter? I can't get this one person who was a witness to speak. So it was almost like preparing a case of, what are my chances? So that I feel that inhibits a lot of folks from speaking out because they're used to trying cases. They're used to presenting evidence, and they themselves might not have a solid case. So they think, why would I bother? If I wouldn't do this in court, what's the likelihood I'm going to do it here? And it's my job on the line. So I think that sensitive, and I had a lot of hangups with that. I didn't know, but it got to a boiling point where I said, okay, I'm going to leave in a while, but I'm not going to make that the worst time of my life. And if he does it to me, he'll do it to female interns. He'll do it to the paralegal. So fine, I'm out anyway in a while. If it's going to be uncomfortable, it's going to be uncomfortable, but I'm not going out silent.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you for that. And it's something that we always want to be cognizant of, right? And I want us to all treat everybody with a lot of respect. Does that make sense? And, love, and I don't mean that kind of love. I meant, the universal love, that I think that we should really have out there. This is why I think you and I resonate, on multiple levels, every time that we talk about it. That being the case, interesting matters that you've handled. Are there any war stories, Commissioner, that you would like to share with us, that you can share and that you'd like to share with us? I think my students love hearing these.
So if they like war stories, I will just recommend, I don't know about currently, but in normal times, family court is open to the public. So DCF day on Thursdays, that's open to the public. And I remember that internship just being war story after war story, and you couldn't make it up. That said, practicing myself, Facebook actually reminded me because I wrote about it a couple of years ago. There was a H-2B work group of immigrants from Mexico. They were an agriculture crew. They had visas to come here to work. Great. Their sponsor was supposed to pay them at a certain schedule, a certain amount, give them certain housing. None of that really happened. They let it go, but they were about to go back to Mexico and they hadn't been paid for the last 2 weeks of work. And the sponsor kept saying, yeah, we'll send it to you in Mexico. Don't worry. So most likely they were going to go without, maybe $1,000 of pay, which is a substantial amount.
Substantial amount for them, right?
Yeah, especially back home. Like that
a lot
is
of money for me. Yeah, I can imagine.
And for backbreaking labor out in the Florida sun in the middle of summer.
Yeah.
Because it would have been July.
Yeah.
That's when I wrote it. And we had gone over there. They had asked me to go because I spoke Spanish, because it was farm workers. There were other issues involved. And I said, sure, I'll go by. And we're talking for a while. I'm asking questions about the pay situation so we can get them properly represented. And about 15-ish minutes in, a crew chief arrives and he starts, snooping and looks at me in like dress and heels and a little headband and my clipboard. And he's just completely unimpressed. And in Spanish, he's like, who are you? Give me a card. And I said, I respond in English. I'm going to throw you off balance. Why should I give you my card? Who are you? He's like, well, I need your card so I know who you are. I'm like, for what purpose? And the English is really flustering him. He's not used to people, much less women, talking back to him. And he's like, I need to know who to sue so I can report you to the bureau. And I said, the bureau of what? And he just completely loses it because I'm absolutely blasé about it. I'm not standing down. Meanwhile, all the crews are watching their crew chief just get taken to town by a small woman. And he like tries to look at the card to see if it has any markings, like goes off. And he's like, I don't know where you're all complaining. Like the pay is here. See, we have the pay. And he had just like walked in with it because he got word that the crews were talking to legal representation. So they had the checks magically ready, even though it wouldn't have
Suddenly
been available
appeared,
until,
right?
Yeah. And so he's like starts handing them out, and like the crews go over to go pick them up. But a couple who lag because there's a line, they're like, I don't think he's ever been spoken to. I might have sworn at him at some point as he walked away, very creatively in Spanish. So they respected that. But yeah, they themselves hadn't really spoken up to them, to the crew chief or the sponsor. And it was a matter of, I didn't have to do much. I just had to show up and ask questions. And that was enough to scare them into just doing what they should have done in the first place. I think they were literally leaving that week and they wouldn't have had any other option. So representing them from Mexico, getting any of that ready here, it would have been almost hopeless. But just showing up did the whole thing and they got paid. That to me, that was very early on in my career. And I was like, oh my God, I just have to show up and I have all this power.
Right.
This
Talk about empowerment, right?
But yeah, and it was on. Like I didn't really do much. I just sat here. I watched and I learned that watching and being people knowing that you're watching is one of the most powerful things that you can be. It's one of the most powerful things you can do is just be visibly present and aware. And that terrifies people because they instantly start doing what they should have been doing.
And I was going to say, as a commissioner, I think you would agree, with great power comes great responsibility, right? And the other converse of that is, it's a sad state in our world, right? That we need attorneys to make sure that we do what we should have been doing, the right thing to begin with, right?
Yeah.
And, but you helped. You made sure, right, that the right thing happened. Okay. And congratulations, by the way. I think that's a real stunning accomplishment in your career, on it. And thank you for the message. And I hope this resonates with you too. With the landlords, in town, I tell them, I'm not writing you a mean, lawyer letter or calling you. We want to collaborate. We want to do the right thing. We want you to do the right thing. I just want a safe, secure, right, relatively quiet place for my students to be able to study and to live in peace. The old model, that we used to have at common law, providing a nice residence. And again, sad sometimes that we would need 4 attorneys at the University of Florida, right, to accomplish this task, and feels like 24/7. I'm going to, Commissioner, so many tangents we can go down here. I'm so tempted, on it, but I've got the script.
I'm here for it.
I'm-
Any way you want to go.
I'm cognizant of your time. I tell you what, we're going to get to some fun questions here. I'm going to take a brief break. I always divide these in at least a couple of sections, if it's okay with you. Well, I'll tell you what, I stop recording here. We'll be right back. Okay.